morning and welcome to this episode of ECC Essentials by the Denise Amberly Foundation. Thank you to those who are attending live and to those who might be listening to the recording or watching the recording. As always, the Denise Amberly Foundation is aiming to provide support and help dispatchers across the country do their best. And I, as always, am excited for our guest today, Ms. Tina Bonetta out of Colorado. So while you guys are saying hello in the chat for those attending live, I will just have you give a quick introduction, Tina.
Good morning, Halcyon. Thanks for having me. And good morning, friends. My name's Tina Bonetta. I'm a 25-year veteran of the 911 industry, began as a dispatcher like a million years ago. I mean, well, technically it was 25 years ago, and have worked my way up through the ranks over the years. I've been a part of a police organization, and in 2019 I had an amazing opportunity to take the helm of what is now named Aurora 911. And in those 4 years, I feel like I've grown and learned so much more about the industry. But I'm super excited to be here today because we've been really testing the limits of our creativity with hiring and onboarding the right people to support a healthy work culture. So super excited to talk about it. I hope that anything I share today might be a little valuable. You're always welcome to reach out with questions, but thanks so much for having me here.
Yes, so this is kind of a not related question. You said in 4 years you've grown so much. My other question for you would be, how many times have you changed your hairstyle in 4 years?
Okay,
'Cause that's
so
been its own
yeah,
journey.
it is. You know what? Like if you watch my hair, you will see the journey of Tina's growth, like as a person.
Yeah.
Um, it's funny. I'll have to post like a progression of the pictures, but I went from having very long brown hair with all the highlights and all the things, and progressively it got shorter and brighter and sassier. Um, I think I've reached the limit now of the shortness, but I'm feeling this. And I feel like the more I did that, the more like authentic Tina came into play. And it's funny how much that influences things, because I get comments all the time like, wow, you are such a different person. Like your presence is it feels so different even than it did 4 years ago. So I'm just saying, ladies or men, whomever, if you're feeling like you need to do a little soul searching to figure out who you are, like get into the salon and get after the scissors. Like it's hair, it'll grow back, but
True.
it is fun. I'm like, I don't feel like I'm getting older. I feel like I'm getting like bolder and sassier, and I'm just here for it. So I'm starting to run out of hair to cut, so I have to be a little more careful now. But I mean, it is what it is.
It just reminded me of that because we could do a whole other episode on that.
Oh, for
But
sure.
just that, like, yes, the evolution that is the
hmm
hair, the internal, the external, all the things.
hmm
But we are talking about hiring today. So for anybody watching live, feel free to throw in your questions in the chat. Tina is kind of a pro at these kinds of things. We've both done Justice Clearinghouse, and those are, Q&A at the end. So no holds barred, guys. Just hit her with your best questions.
Bring it.
Um, yes, but I will start off because hiring is just there's so much to talk about, and we only
hmm
now have 20-ish minutes. Uh, but starting with your agency, what do you think was or is maybe still like the biggest hiring obstacle that you've worked through or are working through?
I think it's just always looking for ways to find the reach, because like here's the reality. And I think in a way that the 911 industry is underserved themselves in this way, is that recruiting and hiring, it doesn't begin and end with posting a job application and end with the hire. That process really should be continual, right? And so you are always telling your story, and just highlighting the benefits of being a member of a team, the benefits of serving your community, the intrinsic reward of being a part of something bigger than yourself, being able to serve your community and give back to your hometown. Like all of those dynamics, like that's a story we should be telling. And so for us, like the challenge, and we're making success, but man, you have to be very intentional. But it's really just expanding that reach and maximizing how we touch everyone, like potential team members. Like we're always talking to them. So how are we doing that? Are we doing that effectively? And then really from a technical logistical perspective, I'd also offer up that I find the most frustration occurring with background processes. And so, right, like we're just diving into tweaking those in a way that still helps us identify the best members of our team without getting stuck in a multi-month deep dive that's so deep that we're pushing everyone away or making it very impossible to get on board.
Yeah, especially because I told people like it used to feel more like when I started in dispatch, we were kind of just competing with each other. Like we just it was kind of more of an inner industry thing, to where in today's world we're competing with literally every company, business, and how do we put them through these, these long drawn out processes when they can literally, some companies go get a job and be working by tomorrow morning at 8 a.m.
Right.
And they're in positions, not always, but there's definitely people in positions where they need that job as soon as possible, not in 3 months, 6 months, a
Right.
year.
Asking someone to wait to have a livelihood is, I mean, it's unrealistic. And
Oh yeah.
honestly, like to not to be mean towards the industry, but it's a bit egotistical. Like, why do we think that people would just say, yes, I'll wait? And I think the problem with this is that we've copied and pasted a lot of the onboarding processes from law enforcement recruitment for academies. And we've
Mhm.
just copied and pasted those processes into our hiring, into our backgrounds, like the entire process. And, while we are a critical partner to those functions, we are unique. We're unique in the type of person that we're looking to hire. We're unique in their backgrounds. And I think it's even more important that our professionals reflect the demographics of the community we serve. So if you're in a diverse community, you better have a diverse staff. And I think that we have to do a deep dive into what we're asking for and hone in on all of those areas where we have created inefficiencies by simply cutting and pasting. Like you can't apply the relevance of that practice into what you're doing. For example, this is just very, very recently. I was reviewing a list of automatic disqualifiers for candidates and noticing in there that there are things such as automatically disqualified if you've ever been terminated from a law enforcement agency for departing from the truth. Now, I understand the relevance for a potential law enforcement officer because you have Brady laws and things that would prevent you from being hired. But why so specific? So, are we looking for integrity or are we, like, what is the purpose of that? Should it be any departure from the truth and you've been terminated, or do we eliminate the question altogether because we're applying these standards in ways that are completely non-applicable to our job?
Yeah. And I think that's also just that question, or any question like that specifically, is kind of like um other ones that are asked sometimes where it's like, okay, but were you terminated 5 minutes ago? Were you terminated 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Because then we're looking at, are we expecting people not to grow and learn from their mistakes, that we assume they're just
Mhm.
going to come in with the same thing,
Right.
um, which is also not realistic. But the other thing, going back just a little bit, I was reminded, I think a couple of years ago, I don't remember, it might have been you that told me, for all I know. But when you talked about like we're always like interacting with potential teammates,
Hmm.
someone had reminded me that it's so true. Like people are your best asset. There's a reason that referral bonuses exist in
Mhm.
every industry. There's a reason that, they want people, especially in law enforcement, it's the officers going out, they encourage them to recruit because they know that that's a significant recruiting tool. Um, but I was reminded this even applies to maybe those people who aren't going to make it through training or decide to leave for whatever reason. They may not be working out, they may put in their 2 weeks notice, but we have to be cognizant that we're not just then like treating them any old way, or that we're, just kind of discrediting them until they're actually gone from the organization, because they are also a recruitment tool. Maybe the job wasn't right for them, but they had a
Mhm.
positive experience. So they're like, hey, if you want to do that, go to this agency. Or they're going to be like, no, they treated me terrible when I didn't want to work there anymore. Don't go there.
That's exactly right. So let me just share a couple of things that we've begun in Aurora that I think it's so important, and you hit the nail on the head. It's about honoring the person. Like, this person chose us. This person chose to put themselves through this gauntlet to become a member of the team, and then they put their best foot forward in trying to become proficient in the job we've hired them for. Um, Bravo to them. Yeah, we have to be grateful to these people that they have chosen us. When it doesn't work out, there's a number of avenues I think that we have available to us that I think that we've overlooked for a long time. Number one, I think we have to do everything we can to preserve the person if we can. How can we retain them in our system, whether it's our city, our county, our state? Obviously, they have skill sets that make them qualified to be an employee for someone else. In addition, we've already vetted their character, so we know this is a person of moral character that we want people like that in whatever capacity. So we've partnered with our human resources department to help people find another position in the city, whether it's they move over to the police department and go into their records division, or they go to another department in customer service. We've also created a non-emergency call taker position, which, right, it doesn't give you all the progressive steps that you would if you go the traditional route and then become certified in dispatching and move your way up. However, that's a need, is a customer service need. And I understand that the future of our department is a 911 311 entity. So if you have someone who's really good at customer service but terrible at controlling the call or providing EMD instructions, okay, like, how can we preserve the person because they're bringing value to our organization? And we were successful in placing the majority of our new hires in 23 that didn't make it through basic training, and just a departure from the thanks but see you later, you can reapply another day, or we have to treat these people like the valuable, important members of our community that they are, because you're
Yeah.
right, they're ambassadors, and they'll never forget the way that we treated them, and they will tell their friends. And I can't think of a more powerful recruiting tool or a more powerful aversion tool, right? And so you have that
Yeah.
balance in your hand and you can control that.
Right. And I know my background is small agencies. So I know that that gets tough because you're like, well, we're a small agency. We don't have positions like that. And it's very true. But I think, and you kind of touched on it again, and Matt and I talked about a couple weeks ago, is that intention. Because I think people can also read into that when you're
Mhm.
like, hey, these are your strengths. It didn't work out for XYZ, but we're still here to support you. We just don't have anywhere. I think even something like that leaves a lasting impression. Or even
Yes.
just recommending, hey, maybe look at this. Or I always tell people, if it doesn't work out, let's say at a small agency, what was it about? Is there something you really like about dispatch that you were successful for? Is it something you can transfer to a bigger, or vice
Mhm.
versa? So maybe it's something like that where, like, again, for me, I'm in a smaller area, but I have metro areas near me. So maybe it's something where if I know people there, I can go, hey, this person maybe isn't great on radio, but if you guys hire just call takers, that's your gal, that's your
Mhm.
guy.
Right.
So not even necessarily preserving the person for our own agency, but just even for the industry. I've heard stories of people who are just treated so poorly at one
Yes.
dispatch job and they loved it that they just don't want to dispatch period ever again.
Mhm.
And I just think that's such a huge loss for us.
Think about the network that is the 911 family. And since, the technological age that, like unlike ever before, that we have this community across the nation, and a lot of it is virtual. We do have the chance to interact, but we always have this opportunity, which I love this because, I've connected with so many amazing people in doing webcasts and just being out there having the discussion, that you do build a network of people that you trust. And so, why not write a letter of recommendation for this person and then endorse them to your partner in another city, a state, whatever, and give them the opportunity to be successful? And you're exactly right. Like, whether or not that works out, the fact that we see them and that we support them and that we're valuing them through the entire process speaks volumes. And really, I can't underscore that enough. We've had thank you letters come back to us from people, phone calls. I've gotten Christmas cards. Like, that matters. Like, they felt valued as a human, and we have everything that we're doing in the industry. It's simple, but it's complicated. I think that how we move forward, how we grow, and how we create our own identity is to boil everything down and back to the human. Start at the human level, and then work your way out, and then buy the technology, and then do the things. But start with the people, and then everything you do should be focused on them, and things will fall into place with time. And I think that's just a departure from the rigid, structured, black and white process that we have
Yeah,
embraced and tolerated, honestly, just tolerated for years and years and years.
so true. And so now kind of shifting back, excuse me, to because I'm also, I think you're similar to where discussion is great, but then I'm like, okay, but tell me really how to do this.
Mhm.
So if you could share just kind of at a higher level, because I think you guys have made multiple changes to your hiring process,
Mhm.
what have kind of been the most impactful changes? What have maybe been the simplest changes that have made the most impact, if there was anything as well? Kind of a big question.
Yeah, I'll talk about it just kind of high level, and then we'll get into a few of the nuts and bolts. So, as I mentioned earlier, I think this all begins with telling your story. And so, as we're getting better and better at telling our story all the time, what is happening is candidates are coming forward because they're saying, like, this looks like a culture that I would fit into well. Like, this is what I'm looking for in a team. I want to be a part of that. Like, I'm loving your energy. And so that part, while you have to invest in it all the time, pays dividends, exponential dividends when it's time to hire. Um, Additionally, I just think that putting out the successes, right? The saves, the
Yeah.
life-saving stories. We implemented our Phoenix Award program for our professionals who provide TCPR on a cardiac arrest, and then that person recovers neurologically intact, right? So we're bringing our call taker, our fire and EMS crew. If PD was involved, they're all there with the survivor, with their family. We're celebrating them. We're having all like a moment of closure. I know I live vicariously through that because I never had that. Um, and then we tell the story. We invite the media. We get it out into the community because the truth is, our people are saving lives. They're making an impact every single day. You can find something to celebrate every single day. So capitalizing on that, because that is the part that makes us familiar to our community. And so when we post the job opening, they're like, oh, yeah, that's the center with the disco ball, right? Like, it's
Sorry, I just
memorable.
really like that line you used. Almost before hiring, we have
Mhm.
to make ourselves familiar to our community.
Mhm.
I just think we'll like slap that on a t-shirt or something. Um,
Yes.
I
Well,
just, yeah,
because people don't know us. I learned that the hard way in 2020. Then we went through, we were all going through the pandemic, but the amount of just social unrest in the city of Aurora. And I know you were following that because
like you were getting to a good part of the story.
I know. Okay. I remember where I was too. So everyone just bear with me and thank you for your patience. Halcyon, you'll have to monitor chat because now I can't really see it. But so in 2020, we were all dealing with the pandemic. It was difficult, right? All of us, we were dealing with the fear of the unknown. We were trying to figure out how to take care of our kids because they were sent home from school and we had jobs, and it was very, very stressful. We were worried for our health. But then we had that summer in Aurora of civil unrest. And what I was saying when my computer went belly up was, you were an amazing supporter for me. And I know you were following that because you would give me messages of support just out of the blue from, periodically. And that meant so much to me. Again, the power of the network, right? But what I realized during that time was that our community had no idea who we are. They simply saw us as an arm and extension of a police department. They didn't see us as people who were there to help them connect to a resource. They didn't see us as people who were there to help them in their vulnerable moments and to support them. They saw us as an adversary, not an adversary. I'm not sure where that word, I make up words every day. And so as a reaction to that, right, as we reflected on that, we were like, we have to do better. We have to introduce ourselves. And so that's just been, in my opinion, the most powerful change that we've ever made, because it is allowing ourselves to be vulnerable with our community, for them to see us, for us to know them, and to demonstrate ways to them and to show them how we're serving them and having our own dialogue is so important. And so that's why it's important to tell your story. So moving on to just some of the logistics, because I don't want to overstep those. What we found was that a number of candidates were unable or dropped out of the process because we had a very traditional way of doing our first level interview, right? You'd go through your online critical test, and then if you passed, we would have a week where we just blocked off our calendars and we scheduled, we had a nice interview schedule, and a lot of people dropped out there. Why? Because it didn't work for them. They had maybe another job, they had kids to take care of, and we were giving them limited options on how to interview with us. Totally unacceptable. So, a partner of mine down in Colorado Springs mentioned to me, like, hey, we're using Spark Hire, and that is, not to endorse a specific product. I don't know who else does this. So if there's someone else, I'm sorry. But hey, we're using Spark Hire, and it allows us to, we film questions, we video film our questions, and then the candidate answers those questions from the comfort of their home, their car, wherever, at a time that's convenient for them. Sign me up. And it really wasn't even expensive. When I calculated what we would save by using the subscription versus the man hours it was taking to clear everyone's calendar and bring in a panel of teammates together to interview people, I realized that we were actually saving a lot of money. And so we went to virtual interviews. I'm here to tell you, I think that if you have well-designed questions and you are getting to the heart of what's important, and when I say what's important, I'm not talking about your typing speed. I don't care. What I'm talking about is your character, your ability to give us examples of ways you navigate conflict, giving us examples of times when you've been in a stressful situation and you were able to stay calm and resilient and focused through it. That's what we want to know. And so by creating well-designed questions and making it convenient for candidates, we're pushing so many more people through to backgrounds. We don't need to bring them in for a second interview. We just need to know, do you meet the minimum requirements? Are you able to articulate to us that you have emotional intelligence through your questions? We'll get to the rest in your background. But that's really all we need. And we've had great success. Our completion rate with training is sky high. We had only 7 people in an entire year not make it through training. And for a center this size, that's tremendous.
Yeah.
And then couple that with retention, right? So in 2023, outside of the 7 who didn't make it through training, we only had 2 people depart voluntarily. One person moved out of state, and the other person, that she was like the one legitimate resignation, like, I want a career change. It's time for me to do something different. And that is it. So we've been fortunate there. So making sure to never forget that recruitment also begins with retention, and what you spoke to earlier about, referral bonuses and incentivizing your team to go out there actively and find people that they believe would be good teammates for them, because they're not going to bring in a putz for $1,000 if they're having to cover for their shift because they're a chronic absentee, right? Like, so
Yeah.
who better to recommend people than your people? I can't think of I can't think of a greater subject matter expert.
Right. Yeah, I think for the most part, always an exception to the rule.
Mhm.
But I have friends, and there's friends who I would be like, yeah, come dispatch. And there's friends that I know I never in a million years would invite to come.
Same.
Like, it's, yes, always an exception, but I think that's so true. Like, most people are not going to be, kind of inviting in maybe those who don't fit. But we're coming up on the half hour. This is so good. It is kind of mind blowing to me because like 10 years ago, I did an interview like that. And so I also think, just as a reminder to people listening and watching, just because it doesn't exist in our industry or we're not utilizing it doesn't necessarily mean there's something out there that it just doesn't exist in general. Like you mentioned before, we've just stuck to the same things for so long that I think we're really, as an industry, coming in at a time where we're looking out and pulling things in instead of waiting for maybe somebody to bring it in, or just sticking to, that how we've always done it kind of mindset.
That never happened.
Right. Never happens. So as we wrap up, is there any kind of like a parting thought or anything, a book recommendation, a quote, anything you just want to leave of your parting thought?
Yep. Everything that we're doing currently is centered around the statement of meeting people where they are. The more that you can reach out and meet potential teammates where they are in their homes, on their devices, to tell the story, to invite them in, to to entice them into a culture worth being a part of. Meeting them where they are and making it possible, removing obstacles, right? Like, you have to look at your data. Where are people dropping out? That is a symbol, that's a sign to you that you need to look at that process and potentially reevaluate it, because they're not dropping out because they've just changed their mind. They're dropping out because we've made it difficult. So we have to be intentional on removing obstacles. And the other thing I would say before I go is create your identity. Your identity as a 911 center, your identity as a team. If you are just simply attaching your identity to the coattails of another organization or another part of your organization, you are missing out on a whole option of amazing candidates who would otherwise choose you if they really knew your heart and intention and really understood what you were about. So you've got to get out there and tell your story.
So good. So good. I love it all. As always, this could go into 37 more episodes and hours.
I know. I can talk for days. I love this stuff.
But thank you again for joining us, Tina, and those watching live and those watching a recording. Remember, this will be on YouTube, as all of our ECC Essentials episodes are, and Apple Podcasts to listen in audio format. We will be back in 2 weeks, and I apologize. I believe it's for emotional support animals is our next episode in the ECC. So that one could also be a really fun episode as well. Maybe some animals will make an appearance. I don't know. We'll find out together. But again, thank you for joining, and be sure to sign up for ECC Essentials in the 2 weeks. And for those of you going to BTD next week in Knoxville, Tina and I will see you there.
Yes, can't wait. Thanks so much, Halcyon.
Well, good. Have a fantastic rest of your day, everyone.
Bye, everybody.